Good morning, everyone. I see we have kayakers who are willing to brave the elements to be here today. So thank you very much for being present. We're delighted to introduce Phil Harrington, who is a HASP member. He moved back to this area in 2012, joined HASP in 2013, and has been has taught multiple courses for us, which is a call for you all to consider teaching a course in an area of your interest, if not expertise. We would love to have more HASP presenters. Phil, but from the intro, you know that he is an avid kayaker, has been kayaking for decades, including leading overnight expeditions in Puget Sound area. His educational background led him to both coasts. He did some undergraduate work in Washington, D.C. and some graduate level work in California, and then settled here in retirement in the Midwest. We're glad to have him with us today. And he's currently continuing to work at 1/4 time as a pastor, so almost retired, but still willing to fully engage in HASP. He's currently on the HASP Humanities subcommittee. And I think the only question I have a couple questions. How many of you are kayakers? Or have ever kayaked? We'll do that. Okay. How many of you would like to be kayaking more? Okay. How many know what a happier kayaker is? That's what we're going to find out today. If you've not done so, please mute your phones and I'll turn it over to Phil.
Okay. And I will check with Gloria to make sure that my microphone's on and is proper level and all of that, so that you folks who are in the comfort of your home this morning are able to fully participate as well. I've decided, because we have stand-ins for folks helping out this morning. Sharon and Gloria are helping out because our coordinator came down with pneumonia, and so we wish her well and a speedy recovery to Judy. If you're listening, we're thinking of you, and hope you get back on the water soon. Anyway, because Sharon mentioned expertise, I really want to begin by clarifying I don't want you to consider me an expert in kayaking here in Michigan, or anywhere really. Avid, inexperienced kayaker, and actually someone who has taught kayaking, yes. But I sold my kayaks before I moved here, and despite all the water here, I've not had the time or taken the time to involve myself again in kayaking. You can tell, since I did hang on to 3 of my paddles. I left the others there, but I held on to 3 of my paddles, so you know that I intend to sometime. And I'm hoping that maybe this course is the impetus for me. Kayaking is different in different places of the world, as you will find out. And I do not consider myself an expert in Michigan kayaking. I'm trying to learn some more online and things like that. But I'm also kind of hoping that maybe I'll find someone here through HASP who can help me get grounded in the unique qualities of this area, and what are its strengths and limitations, and what its parameters for kayaking are. So this course actually is a problematic class. It's been discussed not only in the Humanities Committee, but in the overall curriculum committee, because we were wondering whether it really is a suitable class or not, or whether it's a small interest group topic. And in a sense, it is a small interest group. But we threw words in like the history of kayaking and the Zen of kayaking to make it look more like we aren't going to talk much about the history. And Zen is one of those all-purpose words, that you can use to talk about finding the religious dimension of an experience, or trying to get something more out of an experience, which is true, and we will try to do that. I figure if someone can sell a lot of books entitled The Zen of Motorcycle Maintenance, then I can use Zen in a kayaking context. But I was hoping too, very much that that we would find some people who have just heard about kayaking, and are really uncertain about whether it's something they want to get into or not. This class will help that purpose. Kayaking is being billed as an activity for retired adults. Maybe that's because you can have bad knees and still kayak. So maybe some people who can't pickleball, can feel good about the right, though, that we as retired people want to stay active in whatever we can, and kayaking is a good way to do that. Kayaking has been touted as having these 10 benefits. Mental health. People claim that it improves your state of mental health, weight control, stress reduction, heart health and lung health, upper body strength, core muscle strength, and even has found used to be useful for knee rehab. If you've had knee surgery, kayaking is one of the experiences that is not only you can do, but is actually helpful in getting your knees back in shape. Kayaking is a good way to improve your stamina, and has been shown to improve your sleep quality. Of course, a lot of things have, and you get a lot of vitamin D because of you're out in the you're not in a gymnasium somewhere, you're out in the open air when you're kayaking. Now, I did not create this list. I just copied it from a website. And so I can't vouch for everything or prove everything to you, but a lot of this makes sense. I can vouch for some of it. And the other thing is I can see how a lot of these benefits are related to each other. I think that we can point to some of the reasons these end up on a list. It's the nature of the movement that your body is in while kayaking that provides some of these benefits, like heart, lung health, et cetera, and core muscle strength. And people claim that the actions of kayaking almost require you to build a good relationship between your breathing and your movement. Which is also helpful, not just for the physical benefits, but also for the mental as well. Out in the water, you're exposed to a lot of water. Bodies of water generate negative ions. And most of our active life indoors with computers around and other machines and light fixtures and everything generate positive ions. And we need that counterbalance of exposure to negative ions for our mental health, et cetera. And you get them, you can tell it. It's what you get when you walk along the beach, that soothing experience. It's that those negative ions, when you're sitting right on top of the water, you're in a bed of negative ions. And then self-control, with that, I don't mean your emotions there, I guess. What I mean is that you are in control of your action when you're in a kayak. It's like bicycling. You're not depending upon a machine for your activity. Your car isn't getting you somewhere. The roller coaster ride is wonderful. It's very brief and temporary, but in a kayak, you are the person getting you from point A to point B. And there's something very beneficial about that whatever it builds in you, the self-confidence or whatever, that you are getting yourself somewhere. People-powered sports, I think, I need to be much more emphasized in this day and age. And then also your relationship with nature is assumed. I mean, kayaking puts you in a very different relationship to nature than you normally are in your everyday life, and in some other physical activities and games and stuff like that, recreation that you can get involved that also may be helpful. Kayaking changes your relationship with the natural world. It's just you and I know, but I'll ignore it. If you can, I can ignore it. And Pam just reminding me of something important here. We're saving questions for the end, just to make it easier with microphones and things like that. But if there's something unclear, if I said something confusing, just go ahead and raise your hand or shout it out. What did you mean by that? And I can repeat it for the folks at home. If it's not something that's going to involve a long side conversation, just feel free to stop me and say, did you mean to say that? Or whatever. But we'll let this gentleman here, I think it's a gentleman, emphasize this relationship of nature that kayaking allows. You don't normally find yourself in the middle of a body of water like that. The dry land is our normal environment, our feet firmly planted on the ground. And this being in a very small boat, very close to the water, not on a yacht, that's a different experience. You don't get that zen from being out on a yacht. You can get it sitting right there on the water in midst of the natural environment. But now these aren't the type of folks, I showed you them earlier, who gave us kayaking. The people who gave us kayaking looked a little bit different. Namely the Inuit and Aleut people of the Arctic region. That would be places like Greenland and Alaska and northern Canada. Those are the folks we can thank for the presence of kayaks. They created their kayaks on a frame covered with seal skin. So they were using their natural world, their natural environment to help them get out onto the water. And they used it primarily for hunting. It enabled them to get where their source of food was, and not only their source of food, but their source of oil and stuff like that. And so these are the folks, and the Aleut's name for kayak for the boat is where we get the name kayak, and I didn't put it on the screen. It's spelled differently. I should have had. You can look that up. But even though it was a very functional cause that put them on the water in these sealskin boats, these small sealskin boats. Of course, they soon discovered that just being out in the water like that was a source of fun and recreation, as these boys in Alaska proved for us. So that enjoyability of the experience was inherent. What I'd like to spend this class on, trying to get to that Zen, maybe is the way to say this, is looking at how to align our particular interests in kayaking, because there's a broad range of activities you can involve yourself in a kayak, and not all of them may appeal to you. So I'm hoping to let you see that you have choices in what kind of boat you end up with, or even if you do end up with a boat or not. And there are different paths to follow, and they may not all be for you. My particular path may not be what interests you, and that's okay. And then finding a way to invest yourself in it a little bit more deeply, and then expanding your range of activities, how to go about that. And then the very important one I do want to get to is enhancing your safety and effectiveness, improving your skills with whatever form of kayaking you choose. This aligning yourself with your interest causes us to look at the types of kayaks there are. There are kayaks, and you have kayaks. There used to be two major kinds of kayaks: a sea kayak, or what I often called a touring kayak, and a river kayak, or a whitewater kayak. And in the last 2 decades, A third type of kayak has been exploding. And that's mostly of what we see around here in our area of Michigan. Where I picked up kayaking in the Pacific Northwest, it was the sea kayak that you saw most of, because our water, our geography called for that. Here with just simply a lot more lakes and rivers and stuff like that, a recreational kayak is the prominent one you've seen that you see out there in magazines and pictures and among your friends, etc. So let's look at these. This is a sea kayak or touring kayak. They range from about 15 feet long to 18 feet long. Both my kayaks that I left behind and Washington were 17-foot kayaks, and their width very seldom do they get up to the 25, but it can get to 25 inches wide. Usually it's around 22, 23 inches wide. So they're long and they're narrow. Look, see how flat the bottom here is. But if we tilted that on its side, we would see that it's not completely flat. There's a little bit of a V in the hull, which is important. A little bit of a keel factor in the hull. But it's flat. This is here from this angle is what I want to emphasize. They usually have a rudder or a sked. This one has kind of a hybrid. It's a rudder that pops down. Usually they fold back up onto the back of the stern. And those rudders or skeds are not for steering. You don't steer a kayak with a rudder. So if you ever end up in a kayak that has a rudder, don't use it for steering. They're used for particular weather conditions. They're actually used, the rudder is used rather than the steer, is to help you go straight. The rudder is what you use in different conditions in order to go straight. So don't try to steer it, it'll just confuse you and it will not help. But the benefit, the positive qualities of that length and width and the hull shape is speed. The longer your kayak, the faster you can go. And tracking, you can go straight. Maybe you've noticed if sometimes when you paddle and your bow goes this direction, you paddle here and your bow goes that direction. And so your bow is always kind of going like this as you move down. Tracking is the ability for your boat to go straight. And that length and shape help you go straight in one direction. And it also is your body, your effort of your body is much more efficient in a touring kayak. The negatives with the touring kayak or a sea kayak, of course, transport. You can't put a 17-foot boat in the back of your pickup, not in your trunk. You need to have a good roof rack or a trailer, whatever. You have to have multiple boats. So they're not quite as versatile as a recreational kayak is as far as getting to a place you want to put your boat in the water. And then turning. It takes a little bit more. You can turn one of these, but because they're designed for good tracking, it means you have to put a little bit more into it. But you can, but it's just not as easy turning a kayak. You won't turn yourself around quite as easily. You may have to back paddle a little bit more than you would in a shorter kayak. Now this is a river kayak or whitewater kayak. Notice, and they're not to scale. So notice the size of the cockpit here is the same size as this cockpit there. Okay, but so it's drastically shorter. All right, and notice the hull shape. It's almost like a spoon. The bottom of a river kayak is almost like a spoon. There are purposes for this, why it's different. It's not flat and long. Your average river kayak is only 8 or 9 feet long. And look at this, it's wider. It's gotten wider. And that's all, again, on purpose. Because in a river kayak, you are not propelling yourself with your paddle. Your motion is not dependent upon what you do with your paddle. You're letting the river take you. You're taking those rapids, move you along. So you're floating on that, and you're using your paddle to try to stay upright and to turn very quickly, because there are boulders and rocks and other things that you have to be wary of. Just this here is a river kayaker, and his helmet is not for the event of running into another boat. His helmet is there to protect his head when he's underwater, protect his head when it hits rocks. You don't want your bare head to hit the rocks and you spend a lot of time upside down. You spend a lot of time in the water. The shape of the boat allows you to roll very quickly. So you can get right back up but you don't expect to stay upright all the time. And one of these boats, it's designed to help you flip back up really quickly. So the benefits are turning very, very quickly. Imagine that spoon. You just put down your paddle and you got some effect in that rolling over. What you give up is stability in the water and tracking. Can you see now how, if you bought the wrong boat, if you bought something to tool around and like max out with, you would not be aligned with your interest in one of these. And I have seen people mistakenly buy a river kayak, and some of them too ashamed to admit their error and pretend that they like it, but you're just going all over the place, and you're not staying out of the water very much if you mistakenly buy one of these boats. Now this is a representative of a recreational kayak, and here we see the greatest diversity. There's been a lot of branching out too, but this is a representative of a recreational kayak. It's longer than a river kayak, but not by much, basically just 10 to 12, and it's even wider. They can get even wider than the river kayak. Its benefits are stability, and the shorter length also helps you turn more easily than you can in a touring kayak. What you give up is speed. You can't go as quickly, you can't go as fast. Your stroking is not as efficient. The effort you put into it won't get you as far. You'll tire a little bit sooner, etc. And tracking, you'll find yourself wavering back and forth quite a lot. And then particularly in some kayaks, the rescue is a little bit more difficult. So when you do capsize, it's a little bit hard to get your boat upright again and get into it. That's not true for every kayak. You notice that one of the variations that have come out with recreation kayaks is a sit-on-top kayak. Very much different than your other recreational kayaks because your center of gravity changes. Your standard kayak puts you a very low center of gravity. That gives you a lot of your stability. There's initial stability and secondary stability. Your initial stability is when you get into the boat. Your secondary security is when you're actually moving in the water. And this has a much greater secondary stability. A sit-on-top kayak has good initial stability because they're flatter and wider, but it has less secondary stability. So once you're moving in the water, it's easier for you to get off, fall over, capsize. Pluses and minuses, hull shape is everything. So do a little bit more research than I've been able to explain here if you're interested in buying a kayak. Just know that hull shape and length of the boat makes a lot of difference. The other variation you will see is the material that your kayak is made out of. This makes a difference as well. I'm not going all the way back to the Aleut kayaks with sealskin. You can still get those, but they aren't as predominant there. Your basic materials for a kayak, your choices are wood, fiberglass, and plastic. And I have arranged these in their order of desirability. Based on durability, weight, and performance, wood wins the game, the contest all the time. Both wood and fiberglass, and all of these, fiberglass is just a step behind wood. And plastic is quite a few steps behind both of those. Wood and fiberglass are more durable than plastic, not only in the sense of breakage, you know, how they can break or be torn or cut, but also just holding up against the elements. In the Pacific Northwest, we had to deal with salt water, you know. You always had to clean off your boat afterwards because of the salt water. But the sun itself really wears a boat out, and particularly plastic. Plastic does not hold out well in the sunshine. So if you're storing your kayak along the side of your house where it gets a whole morning of sun, that's not a good idea. Fiberglass also warps more easily. So you have to be careful how you store it there too. If it's on its side, it needs to have two supports, at least two supports, rather than just one. And if you don't have to, don't put it on its bottom. Don't let it. Any kayak is not good to just keep on its bottom. And the supports should be soft, like a strap, or something molded to the hull. If you're going to rest the kayak on its bottom, but the plastic is much more susceptible to this problem. Weight, a wooden kayak is the lightest kayak per size. Fiberglass again is just be a step behind that, and plastic is quite a bit heavier. Now there's been a lot of changes in development in the types of plastic that you can buy a kayak in, and I've not kept up with all those. So there are better plastics than others, and they've been working hard and to keep trying to get the weight down on plastics, but it's basically heavier. When I just had one fiberglass kayak, one 17-foot kayak, I also picked up a couple smaller recreational kayaks of plastic, 12-foot. But my 17-foot kayak was still lighter than my 12-foot plastic kayak. I found that out easy. It's much easier to carry my 17-footer than it was to lug around those plastics. And the other thing I found out is that the scratches on plastic made a lot more difference. You know, when you scrape your boat along something, the plastic usually is affected more. And if you have the kind of plastic that can get gouged, those really slow you down. They have, so the imperfections to your surface are much more noticeable in a plastic kayak. And so, but even if you kept your boat pristine, you would find the wood performing the best in the water, followed by the fiberglass, which is pretty close again, and the plastic just not quite as good performing. But the cost of plastic is a lot cheaper, significantly cheaper. And that's why you see a lot of it out there. And there's something to be said for that too. I personally would not like the idea of, well, this kayak is shot, I'll just get another one, throw the old hunk of plastic in the landfill. But there are some practical reasons why plastic is so abundant. But it's not weight. Now here we have four recreational kayaks of plastic and a plastic touring kayak. Not advisable. I've tried to work with those. Those really require two people. You know, a one-person kayak, if it's made of plastic, it's going to take two people to carry easily. Although this person here is looking at this woman here, probably because there are three basic things she's doing wrong in paddling. We're going to get to that later. We'll get to that later. Um, Here are three fiberglass kayaks. That's, I'm guessing, is a 17-foot. And these, it's a little bit hard to tell from the angle, but they're probably a little bit shorter, either 16 or 15-foot fiberglass. Invest in yourself. I'm just going to talk about one way. There are a lot of ways you might find a little bit more zen from your kayaking through investing yourself in the experience a little bit more. Since I mentioned wood materials for kayaks, that's what I want to talk about here. One way you can do it is to leave a little space in your garage, clear all the space in your garage, your basement, and build your own boat. Most wooden kayaks are built by the people who own them. You can buy wooden kayaks, of course, but a lot of people really get into that chance to build their own vessel. And there's something very zenful about that whole experiences, which is why I wanted to bring it up. This is a strip-built kayak, which is one way of building a kayak. You take long, narrow strips and fasten them to a frame that then you mostly remove afterwards when you're putting it together. It gives you a whole lot more ability to design. And so if you like wood, if you work well with wood, you're in your heaven. You can buy a kit that you can buy plans too, and they're very cheap. You can buy a set of plans. So if you want to develop your own wood, you can, or you can buy a kit that has all the materials you need, not only all the wood that you will need, but all the fixtures, the strapping, and everything need to outrid your kayak. And the cost brings it down to about the same as a good fiberglass kayak. But you get to put some time, effort into it. Of course, this is a touring kayak. You can tell not only by the length, but because of the cargo holds that store your gear, and also provide a lot of flotation. When you upturn one of these, your boat's going to float very, very easily, even if you fill the cockpit with water, but because of those cargo holds there that are airtight. And this is a little bit more of a recreational kayak size. And what I'm trying, if you have any interest in wood, to me, it's just the idea of being in a boat made out of nature to get you on nature. I have a little bit of aversion to synthetic materials, but my kayak was fiberglass. And even these kayaks will involve fiberglass, epoxy and fiber. So you can't be a purist. Well, you suppose you could, but not your basic wooden kayak won't get you pure, but it does look nicer and feel nicer. And these perform, oh, they're wonderful to paddle in the water. Oh, and just imagine this though. Imagine this is you out in this boat. And you come up to this dock, and there's some millennials out sitting on that dock, and they see you and they say, wow, dude, awesome boat. Thanks. And then one of them asks, where did you get it? Like, I built it. None, you're not only a dude, you're a cool dude. And also allows you to express yourself artistically if you want, if you know how to do inlay and staining and stuff. Kind of, I don't know what kind of these are. I think that these are it's a dragonfly and cattails, but the materials I think were like from oyster shells or something like that. So there's a lot. When I get my wooden kayak, when I build my wooden kayak, it's going to be a lot simpler. Whether it's just a recreational size like this or something longer, it's going to be, to me, it's just the idea of wood is what's going to draw me into it. Here's another recreational kayak that this gentleman built. Three names pop out when if you start researching this. Have three companies for getting either a kit or just building plans. Redfin is your specialist in the strip built kayaks. It allows you a little bit more shape, options. That's a Canadian company. Pygmy has long been the best reviewed. Has been always rated the best stitch and glue kayak kit you could buy. They're not the strips. You don't have to be quite as skilled in wood and still be able to build one. Chesapeake Lightcraft is another big name. They do a whole bunch of kinds of boats, but they also do some good kayaks. This one is a Chesapeake Lightcraft boat there. This is a specialty wooden kayak. They've patterned it after the skin kayaks, skin frame kayaks. I don't know if you can get a kit for that. Some artists may have just done that, but had it. I like the wood quality of that because put it out. You can also buy a kit for to make your own skin stretched over frame kayak if you want. And this person has tried to pay homage to the origins of the kayak with these Aleut symbols, although the Aleut probably would not have even thought of painting on one of their kayaks. Okay. The other way you can kind of, I guess it's a form of investing yourself, is through expanding your kayak's experiences. If you've just been out on one body of water, a very small body of water, you try to see where else you can go with your kayak. And it could be, I don't think this was in Michigan. But you can go on a kayaking tour. This is probably taken, I'm guessing this is taken somewhere along the inland passageway. The big thing in the Puget Sound around the Seattle area was for a kayak trip would be to paddle up to Alaska. So a lot of people did that, and you can get an excursion company to help take care of all of your supplies and needs and go along with people. So you don't have to, it can be one way of getting more expertise in a kayak. You don't always have to have all the gear yourself already in order to do that. They will provide training. But the idea of starting in one place on the planet and ending up on another, all through your own effort, there's something zenful about that. And it doesn't have to be Alaskan Inland Passage. It could be right here in Michigan. One of my dreams of when I get back into kayaking here is to go up to Spring Lake where I grew up. My family's all from Holland, but I spent my elementary and junior high years in Spring Lake where we had this water. I'd love to paddle, Spring Lake and in the bios, Lloyd's Bio and that, and the parts of the river that we used to get out on the boat. And I really want to paddle to Grand Rapids. Most people float down a river. My goal is to paddle up the Grand. But there is nothing like a hard day of kayaking. You've covered maybe 35, 45. Some people, you can even do 50 miles in a day. Hard day of kayaking, and then camping out in the wilderness, building a little fire to have your supper and your hot cup of coffee or tea or cocoa, and watching the sunset. I mean, that is a powerful experience. And I've been researching right now the best rivers for getting something to travel down in Michigan. Some people do it by going around the lake, the big lake itself, or Huron. But others are doing getting their thrill, their zen out of coming down a river. Or expand your season. Kayak in the winter. Winter kayaking is amazing. Just going out on a snowy, cold morning like this morning, getting out on the water and hearing that cold, icy water splash up against the boat, and no one else is out there. So you've got it to yourself. And it's just, it is pure bliss. I right away started, after I got my first kayak, started kayaking on Christmas Day. I was managed a full string of 12 years consecutively kayaking on Christmas Day. And one of the high points of my experience. Of course, up in the Puget Sound, we didn't have all of this snow and ice on our water. There was only one time I went out on a winter morning where there actually was ice along the shore, but salt water does not freeze generally. But still, that cold air, sometimes rain, it's just, you have to be geared up differently. You have to take more precautions. Can't get into all of that this morning, but I'll underscore it. You have to take more precautions when you go kayaking. I got by with a neoprene wetsuit, like Farmer John's wetsuit, and then whatever I needed for that particular weather on top of that. But I don't think that I would do it here without a dry suit, complete dry suit. Cold water kills you very quickly. You expect always to get wet if you go kayaking, and so that means you take special precautions if you're trying this in the winter. Or if winter kayaking doesn't appeal to you at all, the idea of winter kayaking doesn't appeal to you at all, go out at night sometime. Now, I think in Lake Makatawa, you need a light to be legal. But the experience of being out on the water at night is a completely different one than during the day. I lived for about 10 years right on Case Inlet, the North Bay of Case Inlet, and from my house, my little house, I could see the moonrise on Mount Rainier in the background, Mount Rainier and the sunrise, and which also meant the moonrise. Okay, I could not see from my house the Olympics behind me, but if I would go out in the middle of the bay, I could paddle out there and then turn around and watch the sunset over the Olympics, and then turn back around and watch the moonrise at Mount Rainier. And then it gets completely dark and black, and that is when you get your Zen. That is just at high tide, the water was only about 85 feet deep, but just that feeling, that was high enough to get enough water to get a feeling. You're sitting on 85 feet of water, just this little piece of fiberglass separating you, and it's keeping you alive, and you're out there and you are out of your element, and you hear other noises and you don't know what they are. Is it a sea monster or is it what is it? Once in a while we get whales come into Case Inlet, very rarely though. Usually it was seals out there in that distance. It would be a seal coming up just to inspect you because it's very curious. What is this? What is this strange thing out on the water? But again, taking the precautions you need to be able to see the coastline. You need some sort of frame of reference. You need a light, a target to let you know exactly where to go back. But that can expand your experience. And lastly, and I think probably want to spend most time here. Another way to get more out of kayaking is by increasing your confidence, which means enhancing your safety and the effectiveness, your skills. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Statistics. According to the Coast Guard, usually somewhere around between 80 and 90 people die kayaking every year. I couldn't get statistics in Michigan itself, although most that you hear about, most of the kayak deaths you hear about are in Lake Superior, going out to see those painted rocks, beautiful way to see those painted rocks. But Lake Superior is very volatile and unpredictable. And there have been some deaths, a number of deaths, kayakers. The Coast Guard didn't lay this out according to the type of boat, but in general, boating deaths, in boating deaths, 85% of those deaths, the person who died was drowned or whatever was we're not wearing the life vest. I don't know how you still can die kayaking wearing your life vest, for example, through hypothermia, but it's senseless, it's dumb not to wear a life vest. That can prevent it. Some kayaking writers talking about kayak deaths point out that almost all of them can be attributed to lack of knowledge or lack of skills. So those are things that you can improve. If you look at the complete number of kayakers, you know that 85 a year is not quite so scary, but you don't want to be on the wrong side of those statistics. And so familiarity with your environment is very important. Knowing where you are, what's around the corner, knowing the characteristics of that water environment, and what you need to do to survive on it and in it and have fun and gain the most from it. Familiarity with your boat, knowing what your boat can do, what it cannot do, is very important. Having help at hand. Kayaking in a group is a very wise decision. Kayaking alone can be amazing, but in general, particularly when you're learning, a group makes a whole lot of sense because you can help each other. You're in close contact with each other, or should be at least, or at least if you are going out alone, somebody knows where you went. You leave that information behind. In large boats, they call it a float plan. We did in kayaking too. Somebody knows what your route is going to be, what you intend to do, and where you intend to be. That can also be helped. Having the right gear at hand is also very, very important, and all of that is available. I'll tell you where you could find that, and you can look at some of mine. I didn't keep all mine, but I do have some of it. Plan ahead, not only for what you plan to do, but for what might happen that you don't want to do. What could go wrong? Picturing that in your mind ahead of time will help you be prepared and have the right gear, etc. So always think of what could go wrong, even though it usually doesn't. That's important. And that includes what you wear. Dress to get wet. Don't wear cotton. As much as a purist I am, yeah, I depend on synthetics when it comes to being out on the water. Of course, you can get some natural silk and wool. Can be very, very good clothing for kayaking, but things that will dry quickly. You want things that will get dry quickly and will still insulate you when they get wet. Cotton doesn't. The right type of wool gear will still help you keep warm if you're wet. And of course, the synthetics like neoprene and the things that wick are made to wick moisture away. All those things are what you want to wear. Dress to get wet. Don't ever think about how you might be able to stay dry when you kind of expect to get wet. Expect to go in the water. Rescue strategy. Know how you're going to react to a capsize in advance. And I'm going to be demonstrating a little bit of what I can these last two. Rescue strategy of knowing what to do when something goes wrong so that you don't have to come up with it. And then building your paddling skills so that you can prevent something going wrong a little bit more easier and just be a little bit more confident in responding to dangerous conditions. Because this does happen, this will happen, not all the time, but it can, and then so you should be prepared for it. And so you will find your boat upside down. But upside down in deep water is not the time and place to figure out what to do next. You already know that. And so that's what I'm going to hope that my microphone stays on my head. Maybe I should keep my glasses on for that. Of course, I'm going to demonstrate this with a life vest on. Just a way of preaching that point. Even though you're in shallow water, even though you think there's no problem or nothing's going to happen, it's a good policy to have to always put your life vest on when you're on the water. And a vest like this that's made specifically for kayaking is important, because you can get vests that will hamper your movement, that will get you under the arms. Not good, not good, or will not stay in one place. This can be snug so that it will stay here and not go up over my neck when I get in the water. Kayaking vests have nice places to store things. Like, what have I got here? I have no idea. Oh, I picked up a mussel shell. Put your lip stuff to keep your lips from traffic. This is made for a whistle. You get specially made whistles for kayaks, and that's a useful thing to have. They're very small, very thin, but they carry a long distance. That's what that's for. Okay. Let's see the rest of this. Oh, I'm going to have to let this serve as a paddle float, because I gave my paddle floats to the person who bought my kayaks. Paddles. Let's see which one to use here. Oh, in case I forget, fiberglass is the best. Fiberglass is the best material to get a paddle from, because they're the lightest weight. You don't want to stress yourself unduly. The aluminum and plastic ones, they will serve very well. Don't go out and burn yours or throw it in the trash. They will function well for things, but they also make you tired a lot faster, and they aren't as effective. And fiberglass has a Zen quality, even though it's not natural. You hear that when it hits the water, it slices right in there. And it's such a nice feeling. I can't describe it. It's a nice feeling, a nice sound. This is probably the top of the line. Werner is considered one of the leaders. I'm going to use, and this is a little bit longer than you normally would do. This is for going long distance, a little bit tall, but not too much. The general rule is, length does matter. The general rule is you should be able to put your first knuckle on the top here. You can fine tune it, and a good outfitter will help you fine tune it, because not all bodies are the same. But as a general rule, your fingers should just be able to go there, but not more. Okay, unless you're doing a specialty. You're on a fishing kayak, which is a different type of recreation kind of. You can break all sorts of rules, because those go to Dick's and they will help you out with all that you need. And that's a whole different ball game. I'll use this one for the color of this, although I couldn't quite get rid of my wood kayak paddle. The nice thing about wood is that it's the least stress. This feels wonderful on your arms, just the give that it has. Any kayak should be firm. If you can bend your paddle, it's not doing you much good. So whether it's fiberglass or plastic like this is a fiberglass pole, but has a plastic end, it should be firm like that it does not bend. Okay, so let's get on the water. There are a lot of ways you can get back in your kayak when you're upside down. And some ways are better for certain types of plastic, or some certain types of boats than other ways. And it's something you can discover. A good kayak company will tell you exactly how it's easiest to get back into your boat. But no. I'm going to clobber you. You guys are the screen. Should it be? All right. Okay. In your boat. Now this is not exact perfect position, but I'm going to go upside down. Say here, so this is no longer my kayak, but this is the bottom of the water, and the I've ended up upside down. And so the bottom of my boat is there. I know where my paddle is. Okay, I haven't talked to you about spray skirts, but if I have a spray skirt on, then I release that first. Okay, I know just what to do. I'm not worried. I'm not going to drown. I just release that, and all you have to do is push yourself out with your legs against the bottom of the boat. Okay. So now we'll flip up. Now the table is the boat again, but I am in the water and my boat is upside down. Okay. No worries. My paddle is here. I'm going to let it float right beside me here. I could be under here and be breathing water from the cockpit because air gets trapped into there. You don't want to do that. Oh, this is a cool place. I could stay here no, you don't, because particularly if you're in boat traffic, you don't want to be run over, So it's good once you get out, your boat is upside down, you got a hold of it, you got your arm on it, you're feeling safe. My boat's floating, good. And you look around you, you can see who might be there as a source of help, just because it makes them feel good. You won't need it. You can help, but it makes them feel good. Or if you see a boat out there, you don't know if it sees you, you go like this. You want the other reason you come out of your boat right away, even though if you found a place, because if someone may have seen you. If you're under your boat, they're worried as heck about you. Okay, that's an emergency. If they see you and you're waving, hi, I'm okay, they're at ease. Okay, so now what do? You get out your I usually flip my boat first. Other people will tell you different. You just go underneath your boat. Because I can lift mine fairly lightweight, I just give it a little bit of a lift before I flip it, turn it over, just push it over like that. So it's sitting right side up. Some kayaks you have to go over and pull it like this, but I can just go right underneath mine, a little bit of lift, so I'm not getting quite so much water in the cockpit. I'll get some, but when you flip it over, but it's right side up. And then I know exactly where my paddle float is inside my boat. So I grab that. This is not a paddle float, it's a dry bag, but it looks a little bit like a paddle float, so I'm going to use it as one. And you slip it over the one end of your paddle like this, and then you inflate it. Takes just a little bit of air, to blow that up. You can buy them that already, they don't have to be inflated. They're made out of like a seatbelt, life vest material, some kind of hard floating surface. So you just slip it on. But once you get that on there, then you stick it under those straps that you saw on the boat. Okay. Or if your boat does not have straps, you can quite often stick this in behind your seat somewhere, and it catches on the edge of the cockpit so that it's fastened there. Now you've got a boat, it's right side up, floating with a pontoon. There are several ways that helps you. And some people favor the method of sticking your leg up on top. I can't even do it in this position, but sticking your leg up, outside leg, into your cockpit and using your leg muscle to pull you in. I have found it, most people find it a little bit easier to face this direction, have my one hand on the boat, one hand on my floating pontoon here, and then just to spring yourself up. Just pull yourself up like this, and right away, go onto your boat. I just broke my muscle shell. That's right. It's important to be low on your boat with your chest right down on it. I know exactly where I need to look. My head has to be over the top of my cargo hold and back. It may be different on your boat, but your head is there so that you're far enough toward your stern There goes my microphone. I knew this would be difficult. Low center of gravity is important. Don't expect to sit up right away. Don't expect to stand or anything like that, but keep your weight down flat on your boat. This way I can slip both my legs, however I need to bend them, slip them into the cockpit. Okay. That's what you do first. Right. And then you think, okay, physics is involved here. I've got to roll over. Which way do I want to roll over? If you roll over like this, your boat's going to go with you. Your paddle float's going to go up and it's go all the way over and you can be upside down again. I've seen it happen time and again. One kid we were teaching did it 2 times in a row. He could not figure out which way to roll. He hadn't gotten to physics class yet. Okay, so I want to roll into my pontoon. So that's keeping my boat upright. Okay. Now I'm in my boat, and I'm happy. I'd leave this as long as I can, just for assurance. And then I have to deal with the water in the boat. Very easy. You just take out your bilge pump, which I also left with the person who bought my kayaks. Your bilge pump, you just squirt your water out of the boat. You don't have to get completely dry. You can paddle with water in your boat, but you're lower, not quite as fast. It helps to get a lot of the water out. You don't have a bilge pump yet, a good sponge, which you used to use to follow up anyway, can get some of that water out. It just takes longer, but a bilge pump is quite affordable and it's just very easy to use. Some people keep their paddle float and their bilge pump on the top of their boat underneath the straps. I find I like to keep it inside, at least the bilge pump inside, so it's not air drag, wind drag. I'm not quite as streamlined. Only when I'm happy do I take this off then and go on my way. A little bit wet, but not too bad. You find that once you start practicing it, it's fun. And that's good, because if you're skilled at it, confident in that, you're going to be a lot less panicky when something does go wrong. So, anyway, let's see what else we can talk about here. As I said, there are other ways. Of course, if you're very close to shore and you fall out of your kayak and you're only waist deep, then just turning your kayak over and dragging it to shore is a lot easier. You don't need to do all of that. But this is for when you're over your head, which you should be prepared for. Even if you don't think you do that kind of kayaking very much, you should know how to do that. It just, besides being fun, it makes you feel confident too about helping other people. Now, when you're out with the people, you can make that whole process a little bit shorter because there's a way one person, without getting out of their kayak, can help another person both get their kayak over and get back into the boat. You can very easily grab a hold of somebody else's kayak and stabilize both your kayak and their kayak, so they can get back into their boat without dealing with this paddle float and all of that. But you should be able to know how to do it on your own, by yourself. Okay. Again, effective paddling will help everything. Not only help you stay more fit, to get more out of your experience, get further up the river, further down the river, around the lake, whatever. But also help your safety. So let's return to this woman here who I said was doing at least 3 major things wrong. But because I'm picking on her and I feel very guilty about it, I don't know who she is. She didn't know that she was going to end up in front of you being analyzed and critiqued like this. So let me tell you something she's doing right. Okay. She is sitting upright in her boat. Okay. And a little bit lean forward. That's the way you should be, either straight upright and sometimes just a little bit lean forward. You don't lean back in a kayak. It may seem relaxing, but not only does it really cut down your effectiveness of your paddle stroking, but it also leads to back pain. And you don't want that. You want a seat where it forces you to be upright and comfortable in that position with the right kind of support. And she is wearing her life vest. Let's not forget about that. Okay. Effective paddling will give you, I think I already mentioned this, greater control, greater capability, greater stamina. You won't get tired as much and avoid pain, and also help your fitness. You'll get more fitness out of the experience if you're paddling right. Now, this is really important to compare her with this, because she's a professional. On the woman on the right here, she's racing, and since you're not going to generally be racing, I don't think, you don't have to paddle just like her. In fact, you probably shouldn't. But there's a couple things I want to point out, because when you are racing, you want to be as effective as possible. And notice where her paddle height is. You know, it's right up there, about the same level as her head. Okay. You don't want it up in the air like this. That's not doing you any good. It's just wearing you out more. A kayak paddle looks different than a canoe paddle. It needs to be used differently than a canoe paddle. So she's trying to go almost straight down here. That does not improve her effectiveness at all. So you should generally keep the paddle, if not completely in line with your head, at least not too far above your head. This is designed for a broad stroke. So you have the length of it even tells you that. You don't go down like this. It doesn't help you out. It works against you. So you're going, you know, I'll demonstrate a little bit better later. And then her arms are too stiff. Okay. And they're too far apart. You got it. Okay. None of that is helping her. Just so I don't compare it just with a professional. Here is a young girl out kayaking, and see her hands are in a much more reasonable position width apart. And her elbows are bent. They're in her hand. You can even see it in her hands. Her hands are not gripping as tight. You don't want to clutch. You don't want to grip. That doesn't help you, and it does hurt you to keep your hands too tightly gripped. You want some looseness in that. You'll know when you need to grip hard and when you need to loosen up. It comes naturally. The most important thing is look at her face. See, she's a happier kayaker, right? Than our friend over here. So that's the important thing. She's enjoying her paddling. And then a couple things I want to point about this guy who is trying to go quickly. He's not racing, but he is trying to go quickly, not like the girl. But you still see his elbows bent and his paddle not too far up in the air, and his hands not gripping so tightly. And notice where he's about to put the paddle into the water. I was debating which direction to face here, but this will help me keep me from clobbering Ron and Pam up here in the front row. Okay. All right. First of all, notice my legs. I should have been the other way. My knees slightly bent. Okay. Those pedals, those foot pedals in your boat are there for a reason. If you don't have your foot up against a foot pedal, or some form, sometimes the boat has it formed in there, a place for you to put your foot on, you're not kayaking. If you just have your legs out straight, you know, in the open air, I mean, not the open air, but if they're not pressing against something, you're not kayaking. You're not having an effective kayak. You need your legs for kayaking. The most important muscles used for paddling effectively are not your arms. They are your legs and primarily your core muscles. Okay, because this is again physics. One possible title I was thinking for this class was the physics and the metaphysics of kayaking. But it's that pressure that you put when I put in my paddle here in the water up toward my foot, that pressure you put against your foot pedal is what is propelling you in the water. and your leg then straightens out a bit, like that, you feel it, that's your power. Okay. You don't have to go way back like this. That's wasted effort. Just go back to about your seat, and then lift it out of the water and then put this one in and just go back like this. So my legs, they're here right now moving, but that's to demonstrate the tension that you will put in your leg muscles. And maybe that's what helps your knees. I don't know when they say it's good for rehab. But you want to turn your body into a machine. Okay. Not always. I mean, you're not always going to worry about effective paddling. Some you're just going to sit there and put it on. That's fine too. Nobody see where the microphone is? There we go. Okay. I might have to take my life vest off and live dangerously. But I'll try to keep it on. Okay. If you paddle hard, then rest, paddle hard, and then rest because you're tired, paddle hard, rest, that will just kill you. That just takes all your stamina out of you. It's like bicycling or hiking, a steady pace, a firm, controlled, steady pace that you feel comfortable in, like you've turned your body into a machine, is what's going to help you out. Then you can go forever. You can paddle all day long. Okay. And your breathing fits into that. Probably is naturally. But if you're really trying to get somewhere fast, you'll probably take fewer breaths per stroke, but your body will find that rhythm where it's keeping in track with your breathing and your strokes are keeping in coordination with each other. And that's what probably has this good effect on your heart-lung health, as well as your mental state too, I think. All right. So what else haven't talked about? Oh, yeah, right. Your arms do come into play. And that's important because the natural tendency is to use this arm to get the paddle back here. Okay. But you want to pay as much time on this arm that's up in the air. So when you plant this in the water, you're pushing forward with this arm up here. That uses both of your arms. So neither arm over strenuously, getting both of your hands in motion. And that you don't need to grip this tight when you're pushing. You just push. So it's like your paddle becomes a fulcrum. Okay. This hand becomes a fulcrum on your paddle. That's in the water. This hand is doing the work, and this is to make sure this stays in the right place. So it's not so much pulling as pushing. You want to get both arms in play. And if it's hard to figure that out, there's a mental image you can use. That imagine your kayak is sitting in mud, not in water, in mud. And when you plant your pole down, all right, you're using that to push your kayak through the mud. Okay, so your paddle isn't moving as much as you are moving your boat across the mud. So the idea is not just to get the paddle back here, it's to get the boat ahead of the paddle. Did you follow that? Okay. Think of that image of mud, and you won't always paddle like you're in mud, but that image will help the effectiveness of your stroke. Okay. Pushing your boat forward. Okay. There's only so much you can do in front of a class here. It's not on the water. And so I thought we'd talk about some resources. You can read about it more at the library. Library is always a good resource, right? That's not a phone number. That is the Dewey Decimal System number of your books on kayaking. And Herrick has a fairly decent shelf, canoeing and kayaking, and some books that cover both. But you will find books there not only on a lot of the basics, but the types of kayaking and kayaking skills, but you will find books on Michigan kayaking, Both boats focusing on Huron and Lake Erie, and other boats focusing on Superior and Lake Michigan, and other boats focusing on rivers. Okay, so going to the library is a good place to start. And now you know where to go. It's a shelf close to the ground. You can get down there, sit and read for on the floor there for forever. I've always found magazines helpful, particularly in reviews of kayaks, because sometimes you don't know where a kayak review is coming from. Is this just a plant? Is this the company jargon? Paddling magazines did a very good job. I don't find them many around anymore. I think paddling still exists, canoe and kayak, but Sea Kayaker that I resorted to a lot is not available anymore. But they have counts of people actually testing a boat or testing a paddle and giving you a thorough discussion of its behavior, in the water in different conditions. And that's important. Paddling Space, I found, is a website that was fairly helpful. At least will lead to send you in other places too. And it's easier to remember that. So I put that one up there. There are others that you may find at paddlingspace.com was good. And then YouTube has a lot of videos. People want to show off that they know what to do. And some of these videos are very good, and others are a little bit sketchy. They're not exactly helpful. That's where I found out that a lot of people out on the river here in Michigan are not really kayakers. They're just out there floating down the river. They got their beer and the stuff, and all the other stuff that they need. And even if they're camping, they're not wearing life vests. And they're just sitting back and just dipping their paddle in the water. And that's if all you want to do is float down and let the river take you. If that's where you find your Zen, that's perfectly fine too. I'm just saying that it's very limited. So be careful. You'll find some outfitter companies that will have some decent and helpful. Just they don't always address every kayak, and so that's something important to keep in mind. That variation. The top up there, it's covered by something, but it says resources local. And you all know about REI, that they've opened up a shop now. That's a good resource for this reason. REI stands for Recreational Equipment Incorporated. It's a co-op. It was started in the Pacific Northwest by a bunch of mountain climbers. And for the purpose of getting gear that they needed at a cheap enough price. I'm not sure that REI has maintained the cheapness of price as much. Their prices have gone up since I joined them in 1981 when I needed a tent and a backpack. But they are very good. One of their highlights as a business is to train their salespeople. They make sure that their salespeople not only know the product very well, but have used the product out in the real world. So it's not like going to Walmart's or whatever. It's getting somebody who knows their stuff and uses it on a regular basis. They're familiar with it at a use level. So you can get into some good conversations with folks. REI can get you a lot of kayaks, but they don't. Our store in Grand Rapids that has opened up is unfortunately not very large. So they don't have a lot of boats in stock. So you won't get to see a whole bunch of boats, but they can get almost any kind of boat that you want, at least a good wide variety. Outdoor Discovery Center is a good place to start. If you haven't started yet, they have some paddling trips on river. I think Kalamazoo and probably some others where you can get a good place. Not too much will be required of you, so you won't go very far, but it will be a good experience and very worthwhile. So get in touch with Outdoor Discovery Center. And then I found this group. I have not heard back from them yet. I don't know exactly how active they are. I can't give a testimony, but this sounds very promising. It's West Michigan Canoe and Kayak Association.org. And their big function is to have a kayak symposium coming up next month north of Grand Rapids at a YMCA camp, and they spend the whole weekend working on kayaking skills and information. And I'm hoping to get there and see if I can find some more resources to help get me more grounded in local kayaking. Because there's a lot I want to know from experienced people before I get out into Lake Michigan. My goal has always been to cross Lake Michigan from Wisconsin over here to Holland. And I may still pull it off. I don't know. I was going to do it for my 60th birthday, but that's past. Maybe for my 70th birthday. But there's a lot I want to know about Lake Michigan, how to read the water, and what to expect from different type of waves that are not similar to the Northwest. And so I put their website address up there. If you're interested, they also have a lot of good links. That's also I'm listening. So I don't have to give you a whole list of resources. These folks have some lists on both equipment and education, and resources for trips, excursions. Uncommon Adventures is listed on there, and other places that might help you get somewhere you want to go. And then part of this purpose was to find out if we should start if we have enough people interested in a small interest group in HASP. Gloria has a sign, look back at her there, that you can leave your name and contact your email address. If you would be interested in there being a HASP group that would get together every once in a while and just share stories, this is what I have found, or maybe even come up with a group excursion sometime somewhere. If that's of interest to you, we'd like to know about it. And so leave your contact information there. If you're listening to us online, just email your interest into HASP and we'll get it on and we'll see if that's going to go anywhere. So I think that's about all I was going to tell you about one of my stupid acts as a kayaker once. The most dangerous thing I did, which was kayaking through a storm at night alone. But I had a purpose. I wanted to get this one campsite on this one island, and I had to cancel it. I'd gotten halfway there once before and realized I had forgotten something critical like my sleeping bag, and so I had to turn back. And so I got to the point where I had to cross over to this island, only about 1.5 miles, and the storm came up and it was already getting dark. And I said, this is stupid, but I really want to do this. I had water coming over the bow of my boat, but I just pressed on. I said, I'm going to get there. I'm going to get there. There was a light, on a buoy in the end of the island. So I had a good target. And I knew that once I got there, I'd be fairly sheltered from the wind, and just paddled down the next couple miles to where the campsite was. I survived just fine, but it was stupid. That's not what you wanted to do. Nobody knew where I was. I hadn't left a float plan. I just want to let you know that I am human. It was an exhilarating experience. I don't regret it, but I do acknowledge its stupidity. Questions that you have? Yeah.
Just a sec.
Good.
Can you hear me all right?
No.
Right.
When you're talking about the wood kayaks, there is quite a bit of labor involved in maintaining those. And could you elaborate a little bit on that for the group?
Not because I have not owned one. I can't do that fully, but the finish would be something that probably have to be renewed every once in a while. And again, rinse off the salt water if you're in salt water, and generally keep it up. But I can't tell you the specifics of that just because I haven't gotten there yet. Both a wood kayak and a fiberglass kayak are more easy to repair if they do get damaged than a plastic is. But they do, just like any other kayak, they do take constant love and tender care. I guess it's yes, yeah.
So I noticed on your paddles that they could be placed in different positions.
Right.
The paddles that you demonstrated on are both blade neutral.
Yeah.
When would you go offset?
I very seldom in windy conditions When I really wanted to work on speed, I would go to feathering them, which is to place them so that when you're going through, when your boat's going past your paddle that's in the water, the paddle in the air is not creating a lot of wind resistance. Okay. And so that means you're twisting. Oh, we needed some water spill for a kayak class. So you're twisting your arms a bit and your wrists. Some people worry about carpal tunnel syndrome. I don't know if that's the biggest problem, if it even is a problem. But the other problem is that a kayak is not just for propelling yourself, it's for stabilizing yourself. One of the basic ways, if you're tipping, you slam down hard with your paddle in the water. It's called bracing. Okay, that can keep you upright. That's you're not completely at the mercy of being tossed about. You can, to this side or this side or both. You can keep yourself upright that way. When you go down in the water, just make sure to turn the paddle up this way when you're coming up out of the water. But now, if you've got your paddles feathered, you have to keep in mind which paddle is in which direction. Because if you slam down here on this side, it's not going to keep you upright. It's going to tip you over. So basically, I hardly ever feathered. It's just, this is not so much of a problem to worry about generally. So that's the thing to keep in mind. Try it, and if you really like feathering, and that can cut off a little bit of wind resistance. But to me, I just didn't find it worthwhile. I just like to always know where my paddle was, what condition it was in. Yeah.
Just one thing to add, and then a couple local observations that might be useful to the group and folks at home. If you're 6'5" and 250 when you're skinny, you need a bigger boat. So I've swamped plenty of smaller ones and just sitting in it. So that's something to think about. The second thing is that there's expeditionary kayakers, as you noted, and recreational for a couple of the major types. Lake Michigan, just like Lake Macataw, is moody, and you have to be aware of it. One of the things people may not know is that Michigan, preferentially with their blue waterways, has given prioritized access for expeditionary kayakers that want to stay at state parks. So you should be aware of that. And then you got dibs on a place to sleep at night.
There's a with Michigan Water Trails Association that has all of that stuff. And this website here has a link to the water trail site. But yeah, that's a good point to emphasize.
Now, on Lake Macatawa, I worked at putting in a series of 4 recreational launches, universal launches, 3 of which are done, 1 of which is pending. But between 2014 and 18, worked at Northwest, Northeast, Southwest, and Southeast Lake Macatawa. Because recreational kayakers, as you know, want to get out there and putz around a little bit, and I'm done and get out. Well, I joke that what I do getting in and out of a kayak shouldn't be witnessed in public. So these universal launches.
Borrow my table if you wanted to.
That ain't going to happen. The universal launches mean that even guys with no legs, fat guys, old guys, young guys, anybody can easily get in and out of them because they're set up to where your kayak is put in the middle. A bench can come out, you can get in, and if you've got no legs, as an example, or you're handicapped, you can pull yourself in and out of the water, and they're stable even at significant water depths. So Dunton Park has one, Ottawa Beach area where it used to be Parkside Marina has one. And I might mention that one, it looks like it's a private thing. It is not, it is public. And so when you go in there on the east side of that location are 4 spots for parking. So you can pull right up where you need to go. And then you can get on one of these universal launches, and the bathrooms look like they're private marina style, have to get in the padlock. Wrong. They're public. You can use it. So I should be aware of that. The one that's very nice on South Shore, and the one I'm most proud of, south side of the lake southwest, is a kayak launch. And once again, has the universal launch features and a place to store your kayak. So if you like to do a shortcut across the lake and go get something to eat, there's racks that you can take a lock along and lock up your vessel while you're gone. Holland's dragging their feet. I'm on Parks and Rec Commission, and eventually we'll get one in Holland. But then something to be aware of on Lake Macatawa is, if blue is your favorite color, don't pick that for a kayak. when you get across the lake, 2 miles and your wife is watching you and your buddies out there paddling. You did, and the same, similarly for the vest, get a very bright colored yellow vest or kayak or something like that, because when the cigarette boats come along, it'd be nice if they saw you, and blue blends right in and dark colors blend in. So that's something to be aware of. And I guess that's enough time.
And thank you, because that's what I was hoping for from this class, is that someone like you would show up with some of this type of information. Since you mentioned those wonderful universal entry things, can be very helpful. A happier kayaker, though, if you want to be a happier kayaker, just get comfortable with getting your feet wet. That's the easiest way to get in and out of a kayak. You'll find videos on how not to do it and how to do it. But basically, if you can get your legs wet, getting out a little bit deeper, then your center of gravity is right where it needs to be when you sit in, and you put your weight first on your here before you put it on your feet. Those are the important things, and it makes life a lot easier if you're comfortable with getting your feet wet. If you have to keep your feet dry, you're asking for problems, unless you have a wonderful universal entry site like that. Those.
I was just going to address what the gentleman asked for about a wood strip kayak. You will have considerable time. I did some research and looked at plans because my son and I are planning on building one, but there's a couple of things you should know. Number one, the place you build it should be the place you store it. You don't want to store that much work out in the sun. There are 2 reasons. Number one is you'll be reinforcing the cedar with fiberglass, and the bonding material is epoxy. Epoxy is a very poor life in the sun. It's very UV, it'll degrade very quickly. So after you, I'm saying over a couple of years, but what you should do after you get your epoxy done is put polyester on it, and then plan on recoating it on a regular basis. And you don't want to start outside, because sun fade will happen to the wood even right through the epoxy and the polyester. It'll lessen it, but it will still be there. The other thing you won't do is drive full speed into a rock beach. You'll learn that real quick. You don't do that. You get out and carry it up, get it out, just set it down. So yeah, there you go.
We got to close.
We do have to close.
I brought other stuff that I did not let my buyer of my kayaks have. So if you're interested in knowing what this is and its usefulness, or anything else in my bag, feel free to come up and ask questions.
So I'm going to say thank you to Phil now. If you have other questions, he'll be here for a few seconds, few more minutes. And so I hope we're all happier kayakers from this point. Okay.
The Outdoor Discovery Center does floats. They provide the kayaks, the life jackets, everything. So if you want to give it a try, that would be a great way. Sign up with one of their float trips.
So let's thank Phil.
And don't forget the clipboard there. So. Okay, this, particularly in inclement weather, in the winter, I've got neoprene gloves and waterproof gloves, but you don't want something